Life feels like a treadmill sometimes. It just keeps going faster and faster. We work and work, we try to keep up, we feel this constant pressure. There's always more to do, more to achieve, more to prove. We check emails late at night, we think about work when we're supposed to be resting. Our phones buzz and pull us back in. It's hard to switch off, it's hard to just be. This way of living takes a toll. We feel it in our bodies, our minds. We get tired, really tired. Not just sleepy, but bone weary. Our patience wears thin. We forget what it feels like to just relax. We feel guilty if we're not doing something productive. This is burnout culture. It's a relentless demand on our time, our energy, our very selves. It tells us our worth is tied to our output. It whispers that we're falling behind if we stop. But what if there was another way? What if there was an ancient wisdom, a countercultural rhythm built into the very fabric of existence, designed specifically to protect us from this kind of exhaustion? What if God, the creator of all things, gave us a blueprint for living that included intentional stopping? A regular, sacred pause. This is where the idea of rest, and specifically the Sabbath, comes in. You know, it's not just a nice idea, it's a core teaching of the Bible, a radical practice for a world that never stops. Let's go back to the very beginning. Genesis, the first book of the Bible. It tells the story of creation. God speaks and things come into being. Light, sky, land, plants, sun, moon, stars, fish, birds, animals. And then humans made in his image. 6 days of intense creative work. And then on the seventh day, God rested. This is a profound truth. God didn't need to rest. He doesn't get tired. He's all-powerful, all-knowing. But he chose to rest. He set aside the seventh day and made it holy. He blessed it. Why? Not for himself, but for us. He was showing us how life is meant to be lived. He was baking a rhythm into creation, a pattern for human existence. A pattern that says work is good, but so is stopping. So is ceasing, so is delight. It's like an instruction manual the creator built in a mandatory off switch. In a regular reset button. He modeled it first. Before humans even did a day's work, before they even knew what work was, God demonstrated the principle of rest. It was part of the original design for human flourishing. We are made to work, yes, to be productive, to create, to care for the world. But we are also made to rest, to reflect, to enjoy, to connect. This initial act of God resting sets the stage for everything that follows regarding the Sabbath. It's a foundational truth. Rest is not an afterthought. It's part of the divine blueprint. Centuries later, God gives the law to his people, Israel, after he brings them out of slavery in Egypt. And there, in the Ten Commandments, right alongside commands about not killing or stealing, is the command to keep the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt for generations, and what is slavery? It's relentless work, it's no rest, it's being driven constantly. It's your life being defined by production for someone else. When God brings them out of Egypt, he's not just giving them physical freedom, he's giving them a new way of life. He's liberating them from the tyranny of ceaseless labor. The Sabbath command is a declaration of freedom. It's God saying, you are no longer slaves. You are my people. You don't have to work yourselves to death. You don't have to prove your worth through constant output. I will provide for you. I want you to rest. I want you to remember who you are and whose you are. This command was radical. It went against the very grain of ancient societies, which were built on exploitation and endless labor. God's people were to be different. They were to embody a different rhythm. And notice who gets to rest, everyone. Not just the master of the house, but the children, the servants, even the animals, and the foreigners living among them. This shows the expansive nature of God's grace and the universal benefit of rest. It's a deeply egalitarian principle. It levels the playing field. Everyone has the right to stop. Everyone needs this pause. It forces us to acknowledge our shared humanity, our shared need for a break. It reminds us that our worth isn't based on our social status or our ability to produce. Think about the wilderness journey. Another powerful example of God teaching his people about rest and trust. They're wandering in the desert, and God provides manna, bread from heaven, every morning. But there's a catch. They can only collect enough for that day. If they try to hoard it, it's spoiled. It teaches them daily dependence on God. Then, for the Sabbath, something different happens. On the sixth day, they are allowed to collect a double portion, and on the seventh day, there is no manna. God explicitly tells them not to go out and look for it. This isn't just about food, it's a lesson in faith. It's God saying, trust me, I will provide enough for 6 days, and I will make sure you have enough for the 7th day of rest too. You don't need to hustle, you don't need to worry, you don't need to work extra on the Sabbath. I've got this. This was a direct challenge to their fear and their tendency to rely on their own efforts. In a culture of scarcity, the temptation is always to work harder, to gather more, to secure your future. But God was training them to live by a different economy, an economy of grace and trust. The manna story shows how vital it is to let go of our need to control and provide everything for ourselves. It reinforces that stopping on the Sabbath is an act of trust in God's ongoing provision. It's saying, I believe God will take care of me even if I step away from my labor for a whole day. This teaching is profoundly relevant for us today, living in a world where economic anxiety often drives us to overwork. Now, some people might hear about the Sabbath and think, oh, that's an Old Testament thing. Jesus came and changed all that. But that's not quite right. Jesus didn't abolish the Sabbath, he clarified it. He rescued it from the legalism that had twisted it into a burden. The religious leaders of his day had added so many rules around the Sabbath that it had lost its original purpose. It became about what you couldn't do rather than what it was for. Jesus famously said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verse 27. This is a crucial statement. It means the Sabbath is a gift. It's for our benefit. It's designed to bring life and flourishing, not to be a heavy load of regulations. Jesus himself regularly went to the synagogue on the Sabbath. He observed it. But he challenged the rigid interpretations that prevented people from doing good. He healed on the Sabbath. He allowed his disciples to pick grain to eat on the Sabbath when they were hungry. These actions provoked outrage from the Pharisees. But Jesus was showing them what the Sabbath was truly about: compassion, restoration, and human need. If someone's ox fell into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't you pull it out? Of course. How much more, then, should we do good for people? Jesus taught that the Sabbath is a day for life, for grace, for acts of mercy. It's a day to focus on God and on others, a day to be renewed, not to be bound by endless do's and don'ts that stifle the spirit. He showed that rest isn't just about physical inactivity, but about spiritual and emotional restoration. It's about doing what is good and life-giving. And Jesus, despite being God in human flesh, also modeled rhythms of withdrawal and rest. He would often go off by himself to pray, to be alone with his Father. This was his way of recharging, reconnecting, and finding his center amidst the demands of his ministry. If Jesus, the Son of God, needed to step away and rest, how much more do we? His life shows us that rest isn't a sign of weakness, but a vital practice for anyone seeking to live a full and impactful life. So, beyond the commands and examples, what are the deeper biblical principles at play here? Why is rest so central to God's design for us? One big reason is trust. The Sabbath forces us to trust God. When we stop working, we step away from our tasks, we are essentially saying, I believe that the world won't fall apart without me. I believe that God is ultimately in control. I believe he will provide what I need, even if I'm not constantly striving for it. This is a huge challenge to our natural inclination to self-sufficiency. In a culture that praises busyness and self-reliance, resting is an act of radical trust in a God who is both sovereign and good. It's a rejection of the anxiety that whispers, if you stop, you'll lose everything. Another crucial aspect is identity. Our worth in modern society is often tied to our productivity, what we do, what we achieve, how much money we make, how busy our calendars are. But the Sabbath flips this on its head. It reminds us that our worth doesn't come from what we produce. It comes from being made in God's image. It comes from being loved by him. When we rest, we stop doing and simply are. We are reminded that we are human beings, not human doings. This is incredibly freeing, especially in a burnout culture that constantly pressures us to perform. The Sabbath affirms our intrinsic value, independent of our achievements. It's a weekly affirmation that we are loved, period. Then there are limits. Rest honors our limits. We are finite creatures. We are not God. We have physical, emotional, and spiritual boundaries. We need sleep. We need downtime. We need to recharge. Pushing past these limits constantly leads to exhaustion, illness, and ultimately burnout. The Sabbath is a weekly reminder that we are not omnipotent. It calls us to acknowledge our creatureliness, to humbly accept that we have boundaries, and that respecting them is part of living wisely. It's an act of humility, admitting we can't do it all and we shouldn't try. And rest is also an act of worship. When we cease from our work and devote time to God, we are acknowledging him as creator and sustainer. We are stepping out of our self-sufficiency and into his sovereignty. It's a way of saying, you are God and I am not. It's a weekly opportunity to orient our hearts and minds back to him, to remember his goodness and to give him thanks. It's a day to delight in Him, in His creation, and in the people He has placed in our lives. It changes our perspective, shifting our focus from earthly concerns to eternal ones. Finally, the Sabbath offers a taste of anticipation. The Bible speaks of a future, ultimate rest, a time of shalom, peace, and wholeness in God's new creation. The weekly Sabbath is a foretaste of that eternal rest. It's a reminder that this world, with all its striving and brokenness, is not our final home. It gives us a glimpse of what life will be like when all things are made new, when there is no more toil, no more tears, only perfect rest and communion with God. It gives us hope, and it reminds us that our deepest longing for rest will ultimately be fulfilled in Christ. So, how does all this translate to our lives today in this relentless burnout culture? It's not about legalism. It's not about a strict list of things you can and cannot do on Sunday. It's about embracing the spirit of the Sabbath. It's about intentional cessation. It means choosing to stop. For a dedicated period, perhaps 24 hours from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, or from Sunday morning to evening. It means stopping from our regular labor, our demanding tasks, our productivity engines. It means putting away the work emails, closing the laptop, saying no to extra commitments. This can be hard. The world pushes back. Our own internal voices of guilt and fear push back. But it's a choice, a discipline. And then it's about delight. What refreshes your soul? What brings you joy? What connects you to God and to others? For some, it might be reading a book. For others, a long walk in nature. Maybe it's cooking a special meal or spending uninterrupted time with family. It can be quiet prayer, journaling, or listening to music. The point is not to fill the time with more activity, but with different activity. An activity that is restorative, life-giving, and focused on relationship. It's also about worship. Making space to connect with God, whether through church services, personal devotion, or simply quiet contemplation. It's about remembering His goodness and recentering our lives on Him, and it's about focusing on relationships. The people who matter most, our families, our friends. The Sabbath provides dedicated time to be present with them, to talk, to laugh, to simply share life without the constant distraction of our phones or our to-do lists. It builds connections, strengthens bonds, and deepens intimacy. The challenges are real, of course. For many, economic pressures make the idea of taking a full day off seem impossible. I can't afford to lose a day's pay. Or, my business demands constant attention. There's also the fear of falling behind, the anxiety that if we stop, someone else will get ahead. And the sheer inertia of our always-on culture makes it difficult to switch off. Our phones are always there, tempting us to just check one more thing. But the biblical call to Sabbath isn't a naive disregard for these realities. It's a radical invitation to trust God in spite of these realities. It's a recognition that choosing to rest, even imperfectly, is an act of resistance against the dominant narrative that tells us our worth is solely tied to our output. And it's a weekly act of declaring that there is more to life than work. And it's important to remember that it's a practice. It's not about instant perfection. It's about beginning, experimenting, failing, and trying again. Maybe a full 24-hour cessation feels too daunting. Start with a few hours, turn off your phone for an afternoon. Decide not to check work emails on a Saturday, find what is sustainable for you, and then gradually expand that space for rest and delight. The goal is progress, not immediate perfection. It's about cultivating a habit, a rhythm, that reorients your life around God's design for rest. What happens when we ignore this call to rest? The consequences are clear. Physically, we become exhausted, prone to illness, and our bodies protest. Mentally, we become unfocused, irritable, and our creativity suffers. Emotionally, we become numb, disconnected, and our relationships suffer. Spiritually, we lose touch with God, we forget His provision, and we become consumed by our own efforts. Burnout itself is a painful consequence of neglecting God's design. It's our whole being screaming, enough. When we push ourselves past our limits, we pay a price. We lose joy. We lose perspective. We lose the ability to truly be present in our lives. We end up feeling like machines, constantly grinding rather than vibrant, image-bearing humans. The Bible doesn't just suggest rest, it mandates it, because God knows what happens to us when we don't rest. He knows our limits. He knows our tendency to overwork. He knows what we truly need for flourishing. Ultimately, the biblical case for rest and Sabbath in a burnout culture is a case for human flourishing. It's a profound act of grace from a loving Creator. It's not a burdensome obligation. It's a gift, a weekly invitation to step out of the relentless demands of the world and into the peace, joy, and provision of God. It's an opportunity to remember who we are, beloved children of God, not just cogs in a machine. It's a chance to remember whose we are, belonging to the one who created us, sustains us, and cares for us. It's essential for our physical health, our mental well-being, our emotional stability, and our spiritual vitality. Embracing the Sabbath, in whatever form it takes for you, is a countercultural act. It's choosing a different path than the one our society constantly pushes us towards. It's choosing trust over anxiety. It's choosing presence over productivity. It's choosing connection over consumption. It's choosing delight over duty. This ancient rhythm offers a pathway out of the relentless cycle of burnout. It offers hope for a more sustainable, more joyful, and more God-centered way of living. It invites us to stop, to trust, and to remember that God is good, and His design for our lives includes regular, refreshing, and profoundly necessary rest. We just have to choose to accept this incredible gift.